At certain times in the past, I'd been pleasantly surprised that I'd lasted as long as I had. Still, it felt unreal that I would probably die in the next few minutes. I prayed for my family, and then I said a prayer for myself. Good, moderately lapsed Christian that I am, I even said a prayer of contrition. Then the van pulled to a stop. This was it.
End of the line,
I heard one of the bastards say. I was pushed out and landed hard on the street, and then I heard the vehicle drive away, gravel crunching under spinning tires. I crawled up and over a curb and then just lay there, partly on grass, partly on a sidewalk or walkway. They hadn't killed me. I was still alive. Finally, I slept. Chapter 152. Then I was awake. At least I thought I was. "I'm Officer Mays with the D.C. Metro Police. Are you all right, sir?" The patrolman spoke to me even as he lifted the hood that covered my head. "Why are your hands tied? What happened to you?" he asked next. "I'm Alex Cross. I'm a detective with major crimes. I was kidnapped." He had the hood all the way off now, but I couldn't see much of anything yet, not even his face. My eyes were slow to adjust to the light, to the street lights mostly. It was dark outside. Night. "Yes, sir, Detective Cross. We've all been looking for you," Patrolman Mays said. "Let me call it in." "How long? You been looking?" 3 days. Finally, I could see his face, which showed concern but also surprise. He had found me. I was alive. I'd been missing for 3 days. "Can you get these binds off?" I asked. "I'll call it in first. Then I'll get the ropes off you." "No press," I told him. "Of course not." "Why would I call the press?" the patrolman asked. "I don't know," I said. "I guess I'm not thinking straight yet." Chapter 153. I was taken home by Officer Mays. The house on 5th Street was dark and obviously empty. Bree had been staying with us off and on, but she had kept her place, so I figured she was at her apartment tonight. Why would she stay here by herself? I would call Bree soon, but I needed to go inside the house right now. I entered through the sun porch, passing the silent piano on my way, imagining playing it for the kids or sometimes just for myself. No, I guess I was remembering. The kitchen had been cleaned up since the last time I'd been there. Probably Bree had done it. Now it was neat, as if nobody lived here. I continued walking from room to room, everything quiet, and I felt unbearably sad. I turned on lights as I went, feeling like a visitor in my own house. Nothing about my life felt right or even real. The world had become such a cruel, unsafe place. How had it happened? How much blame should America take, and did accepting blame really help anybody? Wasn't it time to stop offering criticism and start providing solutions? It was easy to be a critic. It took no imagination. Problem-solving was the bitch. I finally made it up to my office in the attic, and I sat at my desk, looking down on the street, wondering if there was anyone out there watching me. Had the interrogators believed me? Did it matter? It struck me that I didn't really know that much about the world, the larger picture anyway. But who did these days? None of us, maybe. That's what made it so daunting and scary, and took away hope, too. That's what gave us a feeling that everything was out of our control. So who was in control? Somebody had to be, but who? Somebody had to have some answers. Somebody had just imprisoned and tortured me. I continued to wander around the house. I needed to call people. Damon, who I hoped was still safely stashed away, and Bree, and Samson. But I couldn't make the calls yet. I didn't know what to tell any of them, or how to face them. No, that wasn't it exactly. The truth was, I didn't want to put them in danger. Somebody out there might still think that I knew something dangerous and important, or maybe just embarrassing to them. And the really scary part? They were right. Chapter 154. I had told my interrogators about the possible CIA and Tiger connection, but that wasn't important to them. They'd let me go, hadn't they? They could deny all that, and besides, the Tiger was dead. I had cleaned up that particular mess for them. But the thing I hadn't told them was the real subject of Adan's story. The Americans, the French, the Dutch, the English, and several very important corporations were working with the Chinese in the Delta. China needed oil even more than we did. China was cutting corners. They were ready to pay top dollar for oil and willing to make deals, whatever it took. And because of these business ventures, thousands of Africans had died, men, women, and children. That was the one thing that I knew for certain. It was what Adan had been researching and writing about. It was what she had contacted Ellie Cox about. She had talked to Ellie about her research. That was what got her family murdered in Georgetown. Adan had told me horror stories during our time together, especially about life and death in Sudan. Rape was the weapon of war there, and girls of age 5 and up were abused, sometimes by peacekeepers. Hundreds and hundreds of mass graves had been discovered, but were rarely reported on. Police corruption and brutality, some of which I'd witnessed myself, were rampant. An epidemic, really. And kidnappers were working in the Delta area, especially around Port Harcourt. On the couch that had been in Nana's living room since I was a boy, I slept, finally. But not like a baby. That kind of sleep would never come to me again. The truth was, I had accepted that my family was gone, just like so many other families that had been murdered before them. Nothing would ever be the same for me again. Chapter 155. I was woken up early in the morning. Somebody was coming into the house. I could tell that it was more than one person. I jumped up from the couch, trying to collect my thoughts in a hurry, to focus on how to get my gun in the den, when 2 men burst into the living room. I was surprised. No, I was shocked to see Stephen Millard and Merrill Snyder from the CIA. Millard spoke first. "Detective Cross, we didn't know you were here. Someone else walked into the living room behind Millard and Snyder. My God! It was Ali! And he looked all right to me, unharmed. He looked just incredible. Safe, alive, home. Ali, I called, and went forward to him. Ali! Daddy! Daddy! He shrieked as he ran and threw himself into my outstretched arms. My little boy was crying and shaking uncontrollably. No, I was the one crying and shaking. Ali was just holding on to me incredibly tightly. He kept repeating, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" I couldn't hear the words enough times. What was happening here? I wondered, looking to the CIA men for answers. Now I saw that Eric Dana and my friend Al Tunney had come to the house as well. Then I heard, "Alex? Is that you in there? Alex, is that you?" The voice was Nana's, but the next person entering the living room was Janny. She had her arms stretched out and she was sobbing as she ran and crashed into my chest. "Oh, my sweet girl, my darling girl," I whispered as she pressed into me. "Oh, Janny, sweetheart. Oh, my baby, my baby." "I'm okay. We're okay," Janny said. "They kept us in a room. They asked us so many questions. We didn't know why, Daddy. We didn't know anything." "No, of course you didn't." Then Nana slouched into the living room, and she looked terrible and wonderful all at the same time. She came to us, and then we were all group hugging. The CIA agents just looked on, warmly it seemed to me, but they said nothing. "They didn't harm us," said Nana. "Thank God we're all here together. We're all safe." That was enough for this unbelievable moment, the most emotional one of my life. We were all together, and we were safe. Chapter 156. The good mood was broken by Stephen Millard from the CIA. "Detective Cross, can we have a moment?" "Whenever you're ready," he said. I went out with Millard, who I took to be the highest ranking of the CIA representatives at the House. He was the group chief, right? There were 4 of their vehicles parked outside. 3 agents, 2 of them women, stood around on the sidewalk. I wondered if they had been picked to make it easier for my family when they were brought home. "Where were they? Where did you find them?" I asked Millard. "Who took them?" He walked ramrod straight, and I decided he had probably been military before he came to the CIA. He seemed very sure of himself, confident about who he was and his role here. So what was it? Who the hell was Stephen Millard? What was his role? "I told you before, Detective, we're the good guys. We're still the good guys. Most of us are busting our asses to do a good job and help keep this country safe. Ian Flaherty wasn't. He sold us out, maybe a couple of times. The last time it was to the Chinese, maybe to a bad apple from their basket." "My family," I said, reminding Millard of my question. "We had Flaherty under surveillance from the moment he reached Washington. Trust me on that one. He led us to your family. I don't know if they would have been released. A couple of mercenaries were with them. They were working with Flaherty. Flaherty was working for the Chinese. Your family was questioned, but mostly they were just insurance, in case it was needed. Flaherty was afraid you might have found out about him in Lagos." I shook my head. Bribery has become a way of life there. Adon Tansi knew the Chinese were involved with oil traders in the Delta. Thousands of Nigerians have been murdered down there, as you know. "Yes, we know," said Millard. "And you knew the Civil War was coming, but you did nothing to stop it." "There was nothing we could do. We don't need another Iraq, do we?" I stared into his eyes. "Where's Flaherty now?" Millard didn't flinch as he answered. "We have him. We're talking to him now. Eventually he'll talk to us. We know that Mr. Shawande, your tiger, worked for him." "That's all you can tell me?" Millard shook his head. "No. I can tell you this. Go home to your family, Detective Cross. They're special. You've been away from them too much." I nodded at Millard. He wasn't going to level with me, so there was nothing else to say. I turned around and began to walk back to my house. He was right about one thing. My family was special. They were waiting for me on the porch, and as I got close, another dark sedan pulled up in front. Damon stepped out, and he looked my way. He half waved, half saluted. But then Damon came running, and so did I. The Cross family was back together again. Maybe that was all that mattered. Epilogue. The Last of the Good Guys. Chapter 157. I couldn't let it end like that. It just wasn't in me. One night, a couple of weeks later, I arrived at the house in Great Falls, Virginia, at a little past 3 in the morning. Interesting to me, and more than a little creepy, I had received a call from the psychopath Kyle Craig earlier in the week. Cool as ever, Kyle said he was glad I had gotten my family back, and then he hung up before I could say a word to him. I focused and walked to the front door of a red brick colonial that was obsessively well kept. I rang the bell a couple of times and waited. I looked at my watch. 3:11. After a few minutes, the overhead porch light flicked on. Then the door slowly opened. The CIA's Stephen Millard stood there wearing a dark blue terry-cloth robe, his legs and feet bare. He didn't look so impressive without a suit and tie. I heard a woman's voice call from upstairs. "Steve, is everything all right down there?" "Go back to sleep, Emma. It's just work," he called back. Then Millard's eyes came back to mine. "What do you want at my house at 3 in the morning, Detective Cross? This better be worth it." Why don't you invite me in and I'll tell you all about it? I could use some coffee.